"You're still the joke," my father sneered at graduation. I jangled my new house keys and said, "Laugh now." As their smirks faded, the real secret spilled. My father's tone echoed like thunder through the theater. A burst of chuckles spilled from my family, their sounds merging into a bitter chorus of insult. My mother, true to form, sat motionless, her gaze locked on the leaflet resting in her hands, avoiding any glance in my direction. My elder brother, Ethan, tapped my sister, Deborah, and both smirked like they were sharing a private secret. I shouldn't have been surprised. Every success I managed to claw my way toward, no matter how much pain or work it took, was always returned with mockery. My dad never admired me. My siblings enjoyed putting me down. My mother, she stood by and allowed it. So why had I believed tonight would be any different? Graduation was meant to be my victory, something I had achieved completely through my own perseverance. No loans from them, no uplifting words, just me, fighting through endless fatigue and driven by a stubborn desire to prove, mainly to myself, that I held worth. And yet there they were, ridiculing it all like it was a comedy routine. Strangers' eyes landed on me. Quiet mutters drifted from nearby attendees, unsure of what they were witnessing. Some looked uneasy, others unsure. Nobody intervened. I didn't respond. I simply smiled, reached into my coat, and took out the keys I'd been waiting to unveil. I raised them slowly, letting the shine of the metal reflect under the lights. The laughter vanished. For the first time ever, silence took over my family. Time dragged. The only background noise came from the distant joy of other graduates celebrating with their loved ones. But in our aisle, stillness. My father peered at the keys in my grasp, his grin crumbling into something unreadable. Ethan leaned closer, a flicker of concern crossing his face. Deborah's stare bounced between the keys and my expression, like she had stumbled upon a riddle she didn't understand. "What's that?" my father finally muttered, his tone quieter but still tinted with disdain. I spun the keys gently between my fingers and replied, "Oh, these? They unlock my new residence." Deborah snorted awkwardly, her go-to sound when uncomfortable. "Sure you did. You can't even keep up with your rent." I turned to her, keeping my expression calm. "Not rent, a home. Fully mine. No tenants, no leases, no one else's name on it. Just me." I let the words hang in the air. Odd, isn't it? That someone as useless as me made it happen? No one said anything. I watched their faces begin to shift. Ethan's features turned grim. My dad adjusted himself, arms folding as if trying to physically block out my words. My mother blinked as though she'd misheard what I said. For once, none of them had a reply. I allowed the silence to stretch longer, relishing the unfamiliar feeling of power. Then, as though nothing had occurred, I returned the keys to my pocket and stood. "Well done, young man," my professor greeted as I stepped forward, handing over my diploma. His handshake was firm and proud, so different from the apathy I'd grown used to. I turned once more toward my relatives, diploma in one palm, keys in the other. "So?" I asked, tilting my head slightly. "Still funny?" Nobody laughed, but they had no idea that this was only the beginning. Their speechlessness was thrilling. For as long as I could remember, I had been the family clown, the disappointment, the failure, the extra weight. But now I stood here with proof in both hands, a degree and a new property, and not one of them had a clever insult to offer. I wanted to let the truth dig into them, the way their words had carved into me over the years. I slipped the keys back into my coat and turned to go. My work here was finished, or so I believed. "Hold on," my mother called softly, slicing through the quiet. Her voice was fragile. "You bought a place?" I halted, one brow lifting. The same woman who had ignored me unless it served her, now suddenly interested. I turned back, meeting her eyes fully. "Yes," I said calmly. "I bought it." My dad let out a dry laugh, but there was tension behind it. "And how exactly did you pull that off? You've never had real income." There it was. He wasn't impressed. He wasn't intrigued. He felt threatened. I nearly chuckled. He had spent the entirety of my existence hammering into my mind that I was destined to fail, that I lacked strength, that without their guidance I would collapse. Yet now I stood firmer than ever. I moved in slightly, dropping my tone so that only those in my bloodline could catch it. "I achieved it the same method I earned my degree, without a single ounce of your assistance," I murmured, eyes locked tightly on the man who raised me. "Just like I shaped a future while you were too occupied hoping I'd crumble." I gave them a moment to absorb it before I added, "By not turning out like you." His breathing flared, and for a brief moment, I thought he might rise and strike me on the spot. That was always his solution. When authority escaped him, he reached for rage, threats, and control. But this time, he was empty-handed. I turned around, walking toward the doors. If I exited now, my triumph would be complete. Then Ethan mumbled under his breath, just loud enough for me to catch. Probably some rundown place in a lousy zone, he chuckled. No chance he owns anything respectable. I halted. Slowly a grin stretched across my face as an idea bloomed. One that would turn this triumph into something unforgettable. I slipped my hand into my pocket, pulled out my phone, tapped through a few screens, and turned it to face them. On the display was a vivid image of my home. Not a flat, not a broken-down dwelling, a full residence, stylish, clean-lined, behind secure gates. The kind of home they couldn't picture me ever possessing. Deborah leaned closer, her lips parting slightly. Even my mother's hands fidgeted, like she was resisting the urge to grab the device to confirm it wasn't some illusion. My father's face, though, twisted into something sour and cruel. I recognized that face. It wasn't fury, nor disbelief. It was resentment. That was when I realized they were cornered, and they didn't yet understand just how much I'd uncovered. The jealousy settled over his face like a thick shadow, heavy and choking. I had seen that storm behind his eyes before, whenever Ethan earned praise, or Deborah was applauded, but not for me. Not until today. Deborah's glance darted between the image and my expression, confusion slowly giving way to something different, fear. Not concern for me, but fear for herself. You're lying, she said, attempting a laugh that sounded sharp and unnatural. You expect us to believe that you? Oh, but it's true, I said easily, cutting her off. Funny thing is, I wasn't even planning to mention it tonight. I was going to accept my certificate and leave peacefully. I turned toward Ethan, whose jaw tensed like a steel trap. But then you had to open your mouth, and now, I sighed slowly, shaking my head. Now I'm forced to share. My father's fingers balled into a fist atop his leg. Enough of the riddles, he barked. If you've got something to admit, spit it out. I had been waiting for him to say that. I pocketed the phone, raised my posture, and smiled wide. All right then, let's dive in. My gaze moved slowly across their faces, watching their self-satisfaction peel away piece by piece. Father, I began calmly, did you really assume I wouldn't discover the secret loan? All color vanished from his skin. Bullseye. Deborah's mouth dropped open. Ethan straightened, his head shifting back and forth between us. What's going on? Silence, Ethan, our father barked, though his voice cracked like glass. I wasn't stopping now. I continued, watching the panic rise like steam. The one you took out against the property last winter. The one you conveniently forgot to mention to Mom. My mother turned her head toward him so sharply I thought her neck might snap. Excuse me? She breathed. That's when the unraveling began. Her features shifted. I saw the pieces click together in her mind. Her jaw parted, horrified, and I pressed on. You were risking borrowed funds at the tables, weren't you? I said smoothly. You spiraled too far, and instead of facing consequences, you tied the house into the mess. I tilted my head slightly, feigning compassion. And now you're completely underwater. You arrogant, he snarled, his face burning with rage. I raised a single finger. He froze. We've barely started, I said, turning toward Deborah. She turned pale. Don't you dare. But I must, I replied, tapping my cheek with one finger. Fascinating, isn't it, how people overshare online? Makes digging up secrets surprisingly easy. Deborah's throat tightened. You truly assumed nobody would catch on to your overspending, didn't you? I said, sounding amused. Lavish trips, brand-name purses, constant nights on the town, all that on a teacher's income? That's quite the feat. My grin widened. Unless, of course, it wasn't your paycheck funding all that. Her lips quivered slightly. Mom, I added, shifting my gaze to her, maybe it's time you asked Deborah where all that extra cash actually came from. Deborah's breathing hitched. That's not true, she snapped. Without a word, I retrieved my phone and navigated to a particular screenshot. Strange, I said as I turned the screen around, because these transaction logs show you've been quietly pulling money from Mom's savings for 2 straight years. My mother's hand flew to her lips. What? Ethan murmured something faintly, adjusting in his chair, like he could somehow distance himself from what was unraveling. Deborah sprang to her feet. You had no right to look through my financial records. That's illegal. I gave a small shrug. Not if Mom's name is listed as the main account holder. And lucky for me, she is. The room became thick with pressure, every breath difficult. My mother stared at Deborah, then at my father. Disbelief etched in her features. Is that accurate? She asked quietly. Deborah didn't speak, and my father didn't defend her. Ethan, she said. He remained mute, slowly shaking his head. I shifted to face him. Funny how silent you are, I remarked. I'm guessing it's because you already knew the truth. His head jerked up. What? No, Save it, I cut him off. Deborah bailed you out before, didn't she? That incident where you borrowed $17,000 from Dad's firm to dig yourself out of trouble? Ethan's eyes flicked toward our father, panic rushing across his expression. "You what?" our father growled, his tone turning sharp and dangerous. And suddenly, for the first time in my entire existence, I wasn't the target in the middle of a family spectacle. This time, the chaos was theirs. Ethan opened and closed his mouth like a fish out of water, the arrogance drained from him. "Dad, it's not... I didn't mean..." But our father had already rounded on him, his fury redirected. "You took from my business?" Ethan faltered. "It wasn't theft. I just borrowed it temporarily," I chuckled quietly. "Did you ever pay it back?" The silence answered for him. Deborah, still reeling from her exposure, turned to me with spite in her voice. "Why are you doing this?" she demanded. I tilted my head slightly. "Because you all made me the family clown for years. Every time I achieved something, you found a way to stomp it down." I breathed out slowly, tasting the moment. "So now I'm returning the favor." My mother, clearly in shock, looked at both Deborah and my father. "You took my money?" she asked, her voice cracking. Deborah's voice trembled. "Ma, I needed help." "No." Mom shook her head slowly, and for the first time in my life, I saw something new behind her eyes. Rage. Deborah shrank inward. My father remained fixed on Ethan, fists clenched, fury pulsing through him. I allowed myself a faint smile. They had spent years shrinking me into nothing. Now they were the ones collapsing, and I had never felt more powerful. The air was dense with tension. My father, once the unshakable center of this household, sat frozen in quiet wrath. My mother stared at Deborah, hurt and disbelief blending on her face. Ethan had lost all color, staring at his feet like a guilty child. And me? I just stood there, watching them fracture. I could have left then. I had already made my point, but there was one final statement I needed to make. I turned to my father, made sure he was focused on me. "Oh, just one last thing," I said nonchalantly. "Since I know you're going to be begging for financial help soon, don't bother reaching out." His jaw flexed. "You ungrateful..." "No." I lifted a hand, silencing him. "You don't get to scold me. Not after everything you've done." My voice dropped to ice. "I'm through with this family. Enjoy cleaning up your own disaster." Deborah let out a weak breath. "You can't just..." "I can," I replied firmly. And with that, I walked away, leaving them to sit in the very wreckage they created. As I stepped outside into the cool evening air, my heart was calm, my breath easy. For once, I was untangled. No more cutting words, no more emotional traps, no more playing the family's fall guy while they polished their lies. I could have left it there, but I knew better. I knew exactly how they operated. They wouldn't sit quietly and reflect. They'd panic. And right on cue, before I made it halfway across the lot, my phone vibrated. "Mother, return indoors. We have to discuss things." I grinned, letting the call ring repeatedly before I finally picked up, my tone airy. "Oh, so now you're interested in a conversation." I heard movement on the other end. Then my dad's voice filtered through, quieter, more restrained, but I could still detect the pressure underneath. "You don't simply abandon your relatives." A faint chuckle escaped my lips. "That's rich, considering how you all spent years proving I was never truly included." There was a heavy pause, followed by my mom's gentler tone. "Sweetie, please, we're still your kin." I gave a slight shake of my head. "Number, you were a burden holding me down." Another moment passed. Then my father changed his approach, his voice sharper now. "All right, whatever," he snapped. "Your message is loud and clear, but don't go pretending you're superior just because you purchased some property. It's not just real estate," I cut in, savoring the way he faltered. "Want to know what else I've gained?" I let the stillness hang in the air, letting it press down. "Stability," I finally responded. "Employment I can rely on. Financial savings. Assets." My grin widened. "Things you no longer possess." He exhaled forcefully. I could sense it now. The realization was setting in, crushing him. My mom, still grasping at whatever illusion she hadn't let go of, made one last effort. "We require your presence." There it was. Not, "We adore you," not, "We regret what we did." Just, "We need something from you." I inhaled deeply, embracing the weight of the moment, and in the steadiest voice I had ever used with them, I said, "I'm aware." Then I ended the call. Right after I hung up, the messages came in a flood. "Mom, we have to talk." "Deborah, you're acting insane. Just get back in here and stop with the theatrics." "Ethan, this is really about a dumb house?" "Seriously?" "Dad, you can't just shut us out. You owe this household." I let out a laugh. "Owe them? For what?" The endless insults, the constant criticism, the way they drained me like a bank account while simultaneously treating me like I was worthless. Now they were scrambling, desperate, perfect. I ignored the notifications and continued toward my vehicle. Before I could get there, the building doors burst open behind me. "Wait!" I turned and saw Deborah hurrying my way, her heels tapping against the concrete. Ethan trailed behind, fists shoved in his jacket pockets, a scowl on his face. Deborah stopped a few steps away, her expression controlled, though the tension in her jaw and fire in her eyes were impossible to miss. "Listen," she began, speaking in a calmer voice. "I understand that you're angry, but this," she gestured between us, "this is absurd. You're throwing everything away over old bitterness." I tilted my head slightly. "Bitterness?" She folded her arms. "So what if Dad said a few things? Or we joked around sometimes. That's how we operate. We tease. It's not personal." I let out a slow exhale, shaking my head gently. "You still don't see it, do you?" Deborah tried to respond, but I cut her off. "It wasn't just teasing, Deborah. It was years of being treated like I didn't measure up. Years watching Dad applaud Ethan for the smallest effort while tearing me down. Years where I gave everything and received nothing." I locked eyes with her. "And now you expect me to move past it because it's inconvenient for you?" Ethan scoffed. "Come on, man. You've always been overly emotional. We all dealt with Dad's nonsense." I turned toward him. "Really? Because he never called you a failure, never belittled your successes, never made you feel like you weren't wanted." I stepped in, voice lowered. "You had it easy, and deep inside, you're aware of it." Ethan said nothing. He just looked away, his jaw tight. Deborah sighed, rubbing her forehead. "Okay, fine. Let's pretend you're right. Let's say we were unjust toward you. You've made your point. You humiliated Dad tonight. You embarrassed the rest of us. What's next?" I smiled. "Next, I move on." Deborah's eyes widened, startled by how directly I spoke. You can't possibly believe that." "I absolutely do," I responded, turning toward my vehicle, pulling the door open. "You're completely on your own from now. No more favors. No more rescue lines. Let's see how you survive without them." Deborah's carefully held calm shattered. "You can't just walk away from those who raised you." I looked her in the eyes one final time. "Just wait." And with that, I slid into the driver's seat and pulled away, leaving them behind once and for all. As I drove, I didn't bother glancing at my phone. I already knew what I'd find: pleading texts, emotional traps, and probably a few spiteful remarks tossed in for good measure. None of it held any weight. For the first time in memory, they were the ones in need, and I was finished dancing to their tune. When I reached my new residence, I remained seated, simply observing. It was mine, peaceful, unspoiled by their yelling, their opinions, no echoes of criticism, no haunting flashbacks. I entered the house, locked the entrance behind me, and took a moment to just be. As if destiny had timed it perfectly, my device began to vibrate. I sighed, retrieved it from my pocket, and saw my mother's name glowing on the display. I let it ring a couple of times, then picked up. "Hello?" There was a pause, then a voice barely above a whisper. "Darling, I regret what's happened." I nearly chuckled. "Regret?" I echoed. "For what, precisely?" She whispered. "For how we behaved, for what your father said to you. I should have intervened. I should have," her words cracked. "I'm terrified of losing you." I leaned back against the counter, expression neutral. "Interesting," I murmured. "That fear didn't seem to exist when he humiliated me in front of everyone." She sucked in a breath. "That was a poor choice." "He didn't mean it," I interrupted. "He meant every syllable, Mom. He always has." I let out a breath, my tone turning steel cold. "And you stood by and let it happen." Silence. Eventually she asked in a trembling voice, "Can this be made right?" I shut my eyes. Could time be reversed? Could he erase the scars he caused? Could my brother and sister undo the years of damage? Some fractures are permanent. I inhaled deeply and spoke words I never imagined I'd have the courage to say. "No, Mom, it's too late." I heard a sound on the other end, part gasp, part sob. "Please, return. Let's talk face to face." "This is my place," I said, glancing around my surroundings. "And I think it's time you accepted that." Before she could reply, I tapped the screen and ended the call. I stayed where I was, still holding the device, the finality of it all settling into my bones. Then slowly, I placed it on the surface beside me and took a look around. This was my sanctuary, my domain, my beginning. No more chasing their acceptance. No more struggling to be acknowledged. No more shaping myself to fit their narrow expectation. For the first time, I felt light, liberated. I walked over to the front entrance, opened it, and stepped outside. The evening breeze brushed against my skin, cool, clean, unfamiliar. And as I stood there, feeling it all wash over me, a small but certain smile crept across my lips, because at last, I had claimed victory.
Asterisk. After listening to today's story, perhaps it has raised some new questions in your mind, or maybe it has brought back some old memories. Every day on Reddit, new experiences and moments create fresh stories, and they connect all of us. Everyone has their own unique journey in life, and we all try to understand the world in our own way. These kinds of moments remind us that we are all human, sometimes happy, sometimes sad, and always learning something new. If you enjoyed this story, feel free to share it with your friends. Your thoughts and feedback are always valuable to us, as they motivate us to create even better content. Every story has its own unique angle, and our goal is to understand everyone's perspective and make our content diverse and relatable. Stories like these help us realize that life's journey is different for everyone, and by hearing other stories, we learn something new. You can also share your own stories with us. Your experiences are valuable to us as well, and if you enjoyed this video, please leave your feedback. We aim to create content that brightens your mind and gives you new ideas every time. If you've already seen this video before, your feedback is still important. With every piece of feedback, we can improve our content and bring a new perspective to our viewers. Today, what we saw was just a small part of the many stories shared on Reddit and across the world. It's a reminder of how we all try to understand life by sharing our experiences with each other. This video was only an example of how we try to connect with others through storytelling, learning about different sides of life. We hope to continue sharing such stories that help us all learn and grow together. Thank you for your time, and don't forget to keep an eye out for more stories coming soon. If you haven't already, please like and follow for more amazing content. Your support keeps us going, and we will strive to bring you more thought-provoking and heartwarming stories. Until next time, take care and stay curious. **.